Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
In a history once thought too big for one book, the individual lives and careers of the Cambridge Five are now woven together in a single action-packed saga. The Cambridge Spy, the treachery of the five who got away, tells the incredible true story of the five most damaging spies in British history. It's a new book by Shawnna Morris. I'm delighted to say that Shawnna now joins me live on the line now. Shawnna, good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm very well. Whereabouts are you, by the way? It's morning to us. Is it morning to you?
No, middle of the night, so I'm in the Denver area in the USA.
Well, thank you for joining us in that case. It's a fascinating history. What inspired you to try and weave all the five Cambridge spies together?
Well, I've noticed that there were a lot of books about the Cambridge Spy saga, and most of the recent books have been individual biographies. There's just so much that went on during that period, each individually running their own operations. And they are tied together in a spy ring. And I noticed there weren't really any books covering all of them. And when you look at a timeline of what everyone's doing and how they do intersect with each other, occasionally some of their work overlaps with each other, it becomes a completely different story.
I mean, the main thing, isn't it, is obviously the idealism of the age. I mean, we're looking at a time period now where it's, you've got the Spanish Civil War, the international brigades happening in the 30s, the fight against fascism. A lot of people who don't know the reality of Stalin's Soviet Union are thinking this is the future utopia.
Yes, and sometimes people will begin doing something for one reason and continue doing it for another. So the Cambridge spies were recruited just out of university or while they were still in university at Cambridge, which is why they were called the Cambridge Spy Ring. And they were very idealistic at the time. It was during the 1930s. And like you said, there was a depression going on. There was fascism rising at an alarming rate throughout Europe. And they were very motivated because the Soviet Union, again, they didn't have a full picture, but the experiment seemed to be working from the outside looking in. And at the time, the Soviets were the only ones really taking fascism very seriously and really fighting back against it.
So how were they identified? Were they quite sort of high profile, and that's why they came under into the KGB's crosshairs, as it were?
So traditionally, when you're looking for spies, you're looking for someone who already has access to influence or information, someone who's already part of a government ministry or at a high level somewhere. So there was a really fabulous illegal agent named Arnold Deutsch. He was an Eastern European. He was actually Czech, but that was under the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And he was sent to London, a very highly educated man, to kind of infiltrate the university scene. He went on this particular mission, and he first sought out Kim Philby. He was put in contact with him through another illegal agent named Edith Tudor Hart. And he met him in Regent's Park on a park bench. And Kim Philby was already a socialist and had tried to join the Open Communist Party and was rejected for being too bourgeois. He came from too upper class a background. And Deutsch came to him and said, look, you could join the party eventually and you could waste all your time handing out leaflets and writing tracts and organizing demonstrations, or you could go on the inside and help us that way, help us from a more powerful position. And Philby was convinced.
So how was Philby I mean, what was Philby's particular skill set? What was he doing which was going to be so interesting to the Soviets? And how did he bring the others into his orbit?
So Philby actually had a hard time getting started. It took him a couple of years to get affiliated with MI6. He started out as a journalist. Deutsch recommended that journalists have the same skill set actually as agents do. They travel a lot. They need to make contacts. They need to be able to keep a secret. And so MI6 would actually look for journalists. You can't really go there and apply for a job. That's not how it works.
It's not going to be your LinkedIn profile, is it? That sort of thing, yeah.
No, no, not at all. You had to be found. The MI6 SIS did not exist at the time officially, so you really had to be recruited by them. But what Philby did do in the beginning was that he knew a lot of people, and Deutsch asked him for a list of names. He said, yeah, who else might be interested in this little project I have going? And Philby gave him a list of a few names, and that was his first real gift to the Soviets. It was putting him in contact with Donald McLean, was the first, who was really a high flyer, a serious overachiever, Guy Burgess, and eventually he was put in touch with Anthony Blunt and John Cairncross. Those were more through Guy Burgess. But yeah, that's Kim Philby's first contribution, was really bringing the bands together, so to speak.
Bringing the bands together. What was in their makeup that made them want to, do you think, betray? I mean, there's one thing about saying, yes, I believe the ideas of communism or, the Soviet Union. It's because these are old school. This is Cambridge, for goodness sake. These are high class Brits. I mean, Anthony Blunt, who I think is absolutely fascinating, Sir Anthony Blunt as he becomes, he ends up the Queen's advisor on her art collection. And we don't find about him until after his passing. I mean, what do you think was the thing that made them want to do this?
So they're all kind of different. So Kim Philby was a true believer. He was a real idealist, as was Donald McLean. Guy Burgess, maybe a little. He had a youthful romance with communism, rather. Guy Burgess was interesting because he really liked to be involved in everything. He liked to know all the secrets. He just liked to be the center of all the action. Donald McLean really needed to have a secret also. Anthony Blunt wasn't a real idealist. He would have been happy just being a don at Cambridge and being adored by his students. He wasn't really, I wouldn't call him a real serious communist. He was kind of a follower. He was very good friends with Guy Burgess and was very impressionable that way. He was kind of an introvert and rather pliable when it came to strong personalities. So Blunt was an interesting case in that he might not have gone along with this had he not been convinced by Guy Burgess.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? You hardly think he's this sort of secret agent spy leaping off rooftops and abseiling down dam faces or whatever.
Not at all.
Yeah, but it's a fascinating time, and also, of course, there is colour in there, shall we say? It is that there's a lot of carousing, there's a lot of drinking, there's a lot of smoking, there's a lot of
so much drinking.
So much drinking. I mean, there's so much drinking at British universities, full stop. And this is at a time period where obviously, they didn't have the sort of legal limits or whatever they do now. But it must have been very entertaining for you because there are romantic liaisons, on all sides, because you've got, obviously some of them are, quietly homosexual, etc. And there's all that sort of colour going on as well, and also, but there's also a hard edge to it too. So, how do you discover the sort of the carousing and the colour, as it were, which you put into the book?
So, the most colourful would be Guy Burgess. And when you talk about being quietly homosexual, he absolutely was not quiet about it. he was, a lot of people talk about Guy Burgess as having a joie de vivre, and that's a nice way of saying he drank a lot, he slept around a lot. But he was also funny, he could be likable to people, very polarizing. People either liked him or hated him, but he was probably the most colorful of them. And he had a drinking problem from a very young age. And towards the end, he was constantly in some kind of trouble. He was showing up late to work. He was always his shirt untucked, stains down the front of his jacket, kind of a disaster in a lot of ways, but was still very competent in other ways. People would put up with it. And yeah, I mean, there was, in Donald McLean, although they were very opposite personalities, they followed kind of a similar track in their downward spirals, parallel to each other, as their secrets got the best of them, as their drinking got insanely out of control. There was a lot going on there. Anthony Blunt was the only one who's perhaps quietly homosexual, I will say.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, yes. I mean, a friend of mine, he was once described as a flaming. He said, "No, I'm not quietly gay. I'm flaming, dear boy." Looking at the true story, looking at, are they at their most effective? Sort of late 40s through to the 50s, and then it sort of spirals out of they're not giving anything decent back to their spy masters.
So I would say they were actually the most productive and effective during the Second World War, and that was during a time they were highly motivated. Once the Soviet-German alliance fell apart. It was a lot easier for them morally to be doing what they were doing, because they, were also helping the British in a lot of ways by helping the Soviets. The friend of my enemy's friend. I know where you're coming from. So it must have been very, very idealistic. And then, of course, the Cold War starts, and they see American imperialism as well. So that's presumably a guiding factor for them. It is, and that's where Donald McLean and Kim Philby in particular became the most dangerous to the West, because you had, after the war ended, you had this bipolar world order really solidifying against the Soviets, and then you have, we're not just helping the Russians beat the Germans, we're actually giving away bigger secrets that are actually getting people hurt. And so when you talk in terms of effectiveness, probably, again, most of their documents, most of their real productivity happened during the war, but after the war, it became more consequential.
Are they aware of this? Because it's very. You can almost say, "Oh, it's a bit of a jape. It's idolism. They are just in it because of their youthful ideas or whatever." But are they aware of the consequences that these actions will have? Because people get hurt, to put it mildly.
I would say, someone like John Cairncross or Anthony Blunt, maybe not. They were just kind of picking up everything with their hands on and handing it over. In the case of Kim Philby, definitely, he knew what he was doing. And he almost followed, when you talk about the idealism, he almost followed the TV series Breaking Bad. There's a de-evolution where he was just a kid that was excited about changing the world, and then at some point he's getting Albanian operatives killed by leaking their positions to the Soviets. He's getting defectors killed by telling the Soviets about them and what they're doing. So it really takes a dark turn after the war.
And of course, what's their reaction when one by one they are uncovered, or they flee, or they get arrested? Because I've never thought about this. The reaction that must have happened amongst the others. So, for example, when Philby flits, or etc. I mean, what is the reaction of the other sort of in the spiring? Panic, or they got to get out too? Did you find anything about that?
So the first one really that was exposed was through the Venona program of decrypting Soviet cables. The first one exposed was Donald McLean, and he was working at the Foreign Office, and he was in the United States during the war and in the immediate post-war, so he had access to the most important things. He actually sent a few cables back to Moscow himself, carelessly. So through those Venona decryptions, he was the first one really isolated and looked for. And Philby, as a liaison between the SIS and the CIA, and he was also talking with the FBI as well. Philby was made abreast of all of these developments as they begin to close in on Donald McLean. And Philby, of course, panics because once you uncover one stone, the rest are not far behind. And he actually tells the FBI, I actually spoke with a defector a few years ago, and he sort of quietly points things toward Donald McLean. He's actually subtly rolling over on his compatriot to deflect from himself. And, of course, as you know, in 51, McLean is discovered and is forced to defect to Moscow. Guy Burgess was instructed by Kim Philby, do not go with him, because if you go with him, we are close friends, and that would shine a light on me. Burgess went ahead and defected with Donald McLean. And so that there was a huge panic. Philby was under a lot of suspicion, but he held the line. He never confessed, and he was not prosecuted at that time. But it was a rough few years for him after that defection.
Unfortunately, we've only got 1 minute and 40 seconds here at the moment. So,
okay,
your view, because obviously as a British person, as a British subject, Shawnna, I view the Cambridge, spiring with distaste, to put it mildly. But you, as an American, did you find it fascinating to find out? Because we have so much folk history around this in terms of, what happened with, Guy Burgess, et cetera, et cetera. What was your take on it? Why are you drawn to this, and what are you hoping that people will take from it?
So I didn't even discover these guys until a few years ago, probably 2019, when I was writing for a history blog. I stumbled across them reading The Sword and the Shield, and they just kept coming up. And I was surprised at how many huge events they kept showing up, meddling in. And I didn't really react with fascination, but with horror. So it was like you, I was horrified by it, even though I can understand that there's a romanticism associated with them as folk heroes. But they really did do a lot of damage, and they did operate during Stalin's era, which was the most brutal era of the Soviet Union. A lot of people died, a lot of people in the gulags. There's an ongoing famine in Ukraine. So they really were not great guys. They're thought of as an anti-hero. There's a romanticism, and I don't subscribe to that at all. They were bad guys.
If people want to find you on social media, where's the best place to find you? You've got 10 seconds. Do you have a website?
Yes, Facebook. Yeah, Facebook, Cambridge Spiring, Twitter